Thank you very much. And it's lovely to be here. Rather cold in the room I'm in, but I suspect that many of us are cold today. But hopefully I will warm you up with some exciting information and summaries about some of the key issues at the moment in relation to supporting children with SEN and disability. We're in 2024. I think it's going to be a big year in all sorts of ways for SEN. We've got quite a lot of challenges, haven't we? And we've also rolling out the change program, which some of you will be involved with. And some of you here today, I'm sure, will be involved in safety valve local authorities. Some of you will be involved in delivering better value local authorities. And all of you, hopefully, will be involved in some ways in self-evaluation frameworks. So my aim today really is to just, and I can't do any of those subjects a lot of justice in the short time we've got. But what I want to do is give you headline information about what each of those is about, what its intention is, how it could impact on parent contributions, parent co-production, etc., etc. So I'm going to take them in three separate items. After the self-evaluation framework, which was the shortest of the three items, I will pause and allow questions at that point. But then after that, I will go through safety valve and delivering better value together and take questions at the end. So that's the agenda: self-evaluation framework, delivering better value, and safety valve. Right. Self-evaluation frameworks. What are they? Why have we got them? The self-evaluation framework is a local authorities, a local area partnerships way of self-evaluating its effectiveness in improving the experience and outcomes of children and young people with SEN. That's the Ofsted formal definition. When Ofsted and CQC do their local area inspections, they expect, as the first, on the day that they announce their inspection, they expect to receive the SEF, the self-evaluation framework. So every local area should have a self-evaluation framework and should be updating it regularly. And it's not intended just to be for inspection purposes. In fact, if it's for inspection purposes, it's not going to be much use to anybody. Why are they important? Well, SEFs are a really important opportunity to gather user feedback across all areas of SEND. And again, that's something that inspections sometimes find a bit wanting, that local areas aren't doing very well in terms of gathering feedback, particularly from, well, actually, young people are often highlighted as an area that they're not getting sufficient feedback from. Self-evaluation frameworks help determine if the local area has achieved what it planned to do in the time that it says it would. So how successful are the plans of the local area in terms of success? And it is a strategic tool to inform plans for the next 12 months. So they're really important planning tools, evaluation tools, ways of measuring satisfaction and effectiveness. So they provide the local area with an opportunity to be transparent about information relating to SEN in the area, and to try and help understand and provide oversight of all the local issues. They should demonstrate how the local area has worked together. And when I say local area, of course, I do mean the local education staff, as well as local authority social care staff working on the children's side, health staff, school leaders, and indeed parent-carer forums. How have we all worked together to find and implement solutions? A good SEF will identify a time when you can expect these actions to impact. And they also help with, we think they should help, if they're effective, they should help with commissioning and provider relationships. So they understand where each other is coming from and where they're meant to be going. They should show that they know that sorry, I'm just getting my notes together, that they should show awareness that a problem is not enough. They know that there's more to be done, but they should be able to acknowledge problems in the local area. They should be providing evidence that support is not diagnostically led. So that's another issue, isn't it, that we're trying to strive for in some of the changes we're looking for in the change program, that support is provided to children without the need for a diagnosis. And we expect CEFs to mirror that. And we also know that a number of areas have got delays, either in producing their EHC plans within the timescales, or, for example, in particular assessment pathways, for example, autism. How have they planned in the CEF to address those sort of delays? And we think that parents and young people, children and young people, play a very important role in devising and monitoring and providing feedback on self-evaluation frameworks. So we think that they should be, with parents and young people, jointly creating and agreeing on the methods of how to review services. We should be looking to our parent-carer forums, for example, to be able to access the views of parents on issues in the CEF and provide feedback to the local area. So that's supporting the collation of user feedback. Parent-carer forums have a strategic role on governing bodies, strategic bodies in the local area, and they should be highlighting concerns back to the local area, as well as, and very importantly, examples of good practice, good outcomes, and good experiences. Many of you will have heard me over time say, I don't think we do enough collectively on highlighting where things are going well. So we do need to make sure that parents and the young people community highlight the good things as well as the worrying things. I think, I'll just double check that I have attached to this. Yes. At the end of the slides, which you will receive after I've finished, I've added lots of stuff about CEFs because I didn't want to use up all the time to go into the minutiae of them, but I think the information I've provided at the end is going to be helpful. But in summary, a good CEF would be a summary document. We don't want them to be extremely long. So they should be summary, but they should have linked evidence to support what they're focusing on. It should be evident that a self-evaluation framework is co-produced. So there should be very clear evidence about that. And again, that is something that Ofsted and CQC look for. But it should also be clear that it should be jointly owned by all the local leaders, including schools and colleges. And again, I think they're a really important group to draw into accountability in local areas. And that's what some of the change program is highlighting. It should have genuine impact measures for outcomes. So it's really got to highlight what should be the outcomes and the impact of particular strategies and measures that are put in place. We also want to make sure service users, particularly families, children and young people, is there and captured through the CEF. And again, those of you with experience of the new inspection framework will know that the lived experience of families is an important thread, is an important focus. The golden thread needs to follow through from using data to strategically plan and commission services to see how that's operating at the front line, and then to be evidenced by what people experience. So get that sort of golden thread running through a good CEF. But also every local area has issues that they need to improve upon. A good CEF will be highlighting those as the areas that we need to improve on and how we're going to do it over the coming 12 months. My final slide here is in relation to an example of good practice, just preaching what I was talking about what I was preaching earlier. Greenwich had their inspection recently under the new framework, and Ofsted and CQC said leaders across education, health, and care know exactly what is working well and which aspects of their work could be even better. That's a really positive complement to the local area in relation to their joined up work, and also it's highlighted in their CEF. When you get these slides, there is a live link that's there, so do have a look at that and see what we mean by a good CEF. And in fact, that quote from Ofsted is what we would expect in all good areas, that they know what's working well and which areas could be even better, because of course there is no local area that can't continue to improve in certain areas. Okay, I'm going to pause there before I move on to delivering better value. I said this would be a shorter contribution, but are there any sort of burning questions on CEFs? Anything that you want elaboration on, or points or experiences?
There's nothing in the chat at the moment, Andre, but if anyone would like to add a question to the chat now, we can read it out for you.
Okay, well, I can pick up Mary Simpson's question. Are CEFs available to view in the public domain? There's no requirement on a local area to publish their CEF. It's good practice, and clearly Greenwich have done so, but there isn't a requirement to do so. But again, I think that parent carer forums could influence the thinking on that locally and ask for that to happen. Matthew, a question.
Hi, good morning, Andre. Thank you so much. Apologies for being late joining. I understand from recent inspections that actually the meetings that we previously planned with groups of parents have now been put to one side, and they're adopting a different approach. As a result of that, it puts more pressure on us as a forum to collate and organize and evaluate and evidence and prove all the things that we've got going on, rather than it coming in an open meeting with inspectors. I'm a little bit concerned that this reduces the impact of the personal experience, which was always a high value component of those face-to-face meetings. Thoughts?
Okay, yeah. Good point about the change in the modus operandi of the new inspection framework. Clearly, they're still doing the surveys a bit prior to visiting the local areas, so in the 2 weeks before. But I think that whole aspect of parent carer forums having constant feedback loops throughout the 3 or 5 year period before the next inspection is critical, and not just when you think you might have an inspection. It should be a routine thing. But in fact, there is some feedback from the new inspection framework that there is more contact with a very small number of families, isn't there, through the case study reviews and work and contacts with families through that. And that also, I think, includes children on SEN support. So it is a much smaller number of families who have the direct ear of the inspectors, but they are really, from what I gather, really sort of telling their story in no uncertain terms to the inspectors.
I don't want to prejudge this, but in essence, the fear is on this side is that this is a bit of a post office solution, whereby given that those individual families are chosen prior to coming, and on what basis we don't particularly know. We don't know who's involved. We do know that education, health, social care providers are all involved in identifying those fewer parents to do a deep dive on, or however you want to phrase it. Sorry, it's not an appropriate phrase, but you can see how there's a concern about there's less openness and the potential for it to be being managed. And that would be my remaining concern. But thank you, Andre.
Okay. Right, I think I'd better move on because there's probably going to be more comments coming through on DBV and
Andre, I have put my question in the
Yeah.
what's it? If you could,
right. Let me
I
find
can hear
it.
you now as well, so we can actually have a
Good.
conversation.
Right,
about
I can
it.
see your question. My question is that the requirement to co-produce is central to good practice. Recently, we've experienced being told by the local system that they co-produced a document because they spoke to Senkos and SEFs and school management. We challenged that this wasn't co-production. I mean, actually, that's a very interesting and interesting
Very
point,
important
Sarah.
point.
I think I think co-production is about working with other parties who are relevant to the product being produced. That doesn't necessarily, in my view, mean that parents should be involved in everything that's produced. And I don't think, I mean, in my world, and I'm happy to be challenged on it, but I don't think co-production, it cannot happen because parents aren't involved. I think I'm not saying, I don't know what it was that was produced on the school front that you're talking about, but I do think it's possible to say this product was co-produced without parents having been part of it, because co-production is wider than just parents. So
that's not the history of co-production, Andre, and this is a very important point. Then the relationship between another organisation and the power balance with another organisation is very different to the power balance with service users. Service users, co-production is about working with people with lived experience who are reliant on services, and that's very clear if you look at the history of co-production. Working with other organisations is collaboration or partnership work. Now, if the DfE are expecting co-production to happen, they need to be clear about how they are defining co-production and the definition of co-production in the Children and Families Act, because I was there when that was written, was that was working with families and people with direct engagement with services, with a lived experience of services, not with partner organisations. And it's a very dangerous path to go down, because it will enable people to exclude and not for that to happen.
I wonder, Sarah, whether the local authority has misused the word co-production in relation to the task it was undertaking. I don't know.
We would say they very much had, but we were just concerned that their reasoning was that this is what the DfE have said. So, maybe not resolve it now, but it is something we'd like to follow up with you, Andre.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Language is everything, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Okay, I'm going to move on quickly to delivering better value. So let's talk about delivering better value. Delivering better value has been brought in because, as you know, many local areas have got deficit high needs budgets, which is putting pressure on their whole system. And we need to understand why that's the case and what can be done to support their budget system, even though there has been very significant increases in high needs funding. So what are the factors that have contributed to increased spend on high needs budgets? Well, clearly one factor, which is an obvious one, is the rise in the number of EHC plans. That's gone up very significantly over the last few years. We've seen an increase in exclusions, unfortunately. That puts financial pressure on a local area. There have been increases in the numbers of placements in independent special schools. There's been challenges in controlling the cost of those placements as well. So local authorities have found that they've been asked for quite significant increases. Workforce salary increases are impacting on top-up funding. Inflation itself, of course, is a factor in higher levels of spend. There's pressure on health and social care budgets. Everyone's under pressure. Recruitment and retention issues within the sector mean that salaries may need to be higher. There's a perception of decreased inclusivity in mainstream schools, and there's also an issue about the sufficiency, whether there are sufficient numbers of state-funded special school places. These are all factors that have contributed to increased spend on high needs budgets, and those factors are probably common to most, but not necessarily all. And in some local areas, some of those factors have a much more pronounced impact than in others. So what is the Delivering Better Value program designed to do? It's designed to support local areas to implement changes that last. So not just short-term fixes, but sustainable changes that improve support and outcomes for children with SEND, because we need to remember that although we've been spending a lot more, we're not improving outcomes. So that's a really important factor. The findings are going to be used to inform national guidance on local authority management of their DSG, the whole school budget for schools in their area. And some organisations, such as Newton, CIPFA, which is an accounting body, and the DfE are working in partnership to deliver the programme with 54 local areas. A local authority that's in DBV gets an initial grant of £45,000 to help with data collection to inform a diagnostic piece of work that understands what's going on in the local area. They then, if their proposed plan is accepted by the department, the local area will receive £1 million to help with improvement. And we're very clear on the principles behind DBV. It is pretty much what the Green Paper was talking about, to provide the right support in the right place at the right time, in the best setting for each child so that they can be well, happy, etc. We want to make sure that children are getting the support they need, and that the child or young person remains at the centre. We need to listen to the challenges of those receiving support from the system, so those lived experiences. But we talk about collaboration being key, collaboration with local authority neighbours, partners, and the children and family they support. So working together. This affects everyone with an interest in SEN. So what do we expect in relation to the work of DBV, and how do we make sure that the right people are involved? Well, we do expect, and we send out guidance, we reinforce it constantly, that all strategic partners are expected to be engaged and involved in DBV developments and delivery. In the ideal world, this will ensure that everyone understands the DBV programme and the benefits to the local area in the long run. We also know that if you have an initiative, people need to have constant feedback on progress. Otherwise, people get suspicious, and all sorts of sort of visions of what might not be happening or what might be happening are spread without them actually being based in reality. We want to make sure that partners are involved in reviews. The partners are involved in reviews, in surveys, in deep dives, including with schools and heads, head teachers and SENCOs. I do personally think that we've absolutely got to bring schools much more closely involved with local authority responsibilities and delivery. We also know that local authorities, the department and others don't themselves have all the solutions at their fingertips. We all have a possibility of contributing to problem solving. So we need to make sure that all of that is happening. This is a reminder of the 3 tranches of those involved in DBV. Tranche 1 was involved from mid-2022 and is already now beginning to implement some new ways of working. Again, I'm not going to read through all these, but those of you from these authorities should know which tranche you're in. So obviously tranche 3 has started. And in summary, all those we just saw in tranche 1, they've successfully completed their diagnostic work. They're now implementing their agreed plans. In tranche 2, there are 22 local areas. They have also successfully completed their diagnostic work and are now implementing their agreed plans. And in fact, all tranche 3, the most recent tranche, my understanding from a conversation a few days ago is that not only are they undertaking their diagnostics, but they've all very, very recently completed their diagnostics. So they use their diagnostics to formulate an action plan, which the department then needs to approve. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to spend a lot on this slide. You will get it, but the diagnostic modules, and I'm sure that a number of you have been through this with the local area. But there are 3 modules that progressively unpick what's happening at the local area level. But data is always the starting point, the current and forecast level of EHC plans, type of needs, placement needs, etc. So there's a lot of work that goes on in terms of understanding the local area through data. But then there's work that progressively looks at why it's been difficult in the local area to achieve the ideal outcomes for a child or young person, or to achieve a balanced budget. So there are a lot of case reviews. And again, the expectation is that parent representatives are involved in those case reviews, in deep dives and interviews in relation to what's gone on in the local area. And then in module 3, to contribute to problem solving and using that problem solving there to generate a grant application to access that additional funding. I think in advance of today, you will have received a link to a published set of slides that Newton Europe published on the DBV website very recently. But what in short have the diagnostics been telling us? Well, nothing major in some ways, but what they did say was that the themes for improvement include ensuring that a greater proportion of children receive appropriate educational support for their needs in their local mainstream schools. The analyses of what's been going on in local areas show that this is both possible and desirable from sort of almost all angles. But it is about making sure that the appropriate support is available in mainstream schools. Where children need to be placed in special schools, we need to make sure that that placement is absolutely appropriate, and that when they're there, they're getting high quality, effective provision. And also, we need to make sure that EHC plans are delivering effective outcomes, and that we are reducing the NEET population, those who are not in education, employment, or training. So those are the 3 themes that most of the diagnostics have left with individual local authorities. You need to ensure that a greater proportion of children are getting the right help in their mainstream school setting. You need to make sure that children are being appropriately placed in local special schools, and we need to do better about achieving good outcomes. Those 3 opportunities may not be right for every local area, but there's certainly coming up as a common theme in many. This is the publication I was referring to. So what's the summary of evidence from tranche 2? What are we learning from tranche 2 through engagement with key stakeholders? In the tranche 2 local areas and in tranche 1, these are some of the numbers of those who have been engaged and contributing. I won't read them out, you can see them there, but by far the largest group that has been contributing are parent carers, over 5,000 in tranche 1 and tranche 2 local areas, and a lot of children as well. Saying through their contributions to the diagnostics, well, the number one thing that they believed was necessary for an EHC plan was to access additional one-to-one time in a classroom. They also felt that what would be most helpful to support a more inclusive system would be staff who are better skilled and trained to understand their child's needs. And those two, so additional time in a classroom and a staff who better understand their needs, were the big items in relation to responses about how can, what is an EHC plan giving that it didn't have, that a child didn't have before. So a really big message there about two big items. Then parents have been giving feedback on why they think their child needed a special school placement. So there are lots of children involved in the diagnostics who were placed in special schools. What did parents and carers say was the main reasons for them going to a special school? Well, fairly obviously, probably, my child's mainstream school couldn't meet my child's needs. So, you know, fairly open and fairly bland observation. But they also felt that there was guidance from the mainstream school that said, actually, your child should go to special school. And they also felt that the mainstream school really wasn't able to meet their child's needs. What did parents, on the right-hand side, what did parents say needed to change in their child's previous mainstream school for them to have been supported successfully? And again, perhaps it's no surprise that additional one-to-one support is needed for their child. And again, it's echoing the point from the previous slide. Teachers and staff need to have better understanding of my child's needs. That's what we saw on the previous slide about why an EHC plan is necessary. That's what we're hearing about why a mainstream school is not right for the child. If we could crack those two, then we think that more parents would be saying, actually, my child can be supported in the mainstream school because they are getting additional support that's appropriate for them as they need it in the mainstream school, and the teachers have a better understanding of my child's needs. This is a slide, and there are many slides, and when you get this set of slides, please do look at it in more detail, because I can't do the set of slides justice today. But case reviews, looking at every child who'd got a plan in the local area who was going to special schools, what would the classroom and the wider environment need to look like for the child to receive the support? And again, it's back to availability of extra support and more teacher time and support. Availability of support, specialist support staff, such as speech and language therapists and so on. So if these were more available, parents would have more confidence. If these were more available through ordinarily available provision, in other words, without the need for a statutory document such as an EHC plan, parents were saying that parents and teachers and others were saying this would be helpful and we wouldn't need an EHC plan. Interestingly, again, it's on these slides that you can read. Case reviews found that if the right mainstream support had been available, 56% of children in mainstream schools could have been effectively supported in mainstream schools. That's a very big finding, isn't it? I'm sure that somebody will want to come back to me on that one at some point, but it's quite a powerful message about what is very possible given additional support in mainstream schools and better understanding by teachers. And parents and others were asked, if the child in the special school is not in the ideal provision, what would have been better for them if mainstream support had been in place? Well, mainstream school, that was the largest, but then also having more resource provision, more SEN units in mainstream schools. And certainly, again, as I'm sure you're aware, local authorities have got additional capital resource to use. Many of them are using that for enhancing the range of units and resource provision in mainstream schools, which again can support placements of children in mainstream sector rather than the need to go to special. And again, one thing we need to keep remembering is there's very significant variation from one local area and indeed from one region to another in the percent of children who are placed in special schools with EHC plans. So again, there's wide variation, and that was a main source of concern when we issued the Green Paper, the variability in the lived experience and placement behavior of for children with special needs. There is a wide range. So some local areas have got many more children with EHC plans in mainstream schools than others. So the Tranche 1 local authorities are now underway with their grant. What are they using that for? Well, there are some of the things that are being tried out in some of the local areas, using a toolkit of good practice to support children in mainstream, developing and training and delivering training programs. Again, we were hearing from children, young people and parents that stuff about special needs. We're trying to make sure there's more training available. Deploying specific resource to bring the training tool to schools, so make sure that they are not just producing training, but actually delivering it. Developing local dashboards. Again, we're going to be doing that as part of the change program. We're monitoring that closely. We have a team of people who are monitoring the grant application and implementation and the outcomes. These are some of the questions that we are following up with. I'm going to go straight into safety valve, and then I'll stop and pick up some of the questions. Safety valve's actually been around for a bit longer than DBV, but the intention there was to improve the effectiveness of high needs systems in local authorities. Safety valve, in essence, is for local authorities with the highest level of deficit. In the early days, we made 5 agreements with local authorities. This is now expanded to 34 local authorities, with the possibility of a handful more joining quite soon. Again, when you get the slides, you can click on that 34 LA link, and you will see which are the 34. A safety valve agreement with the department holds local authorities to account for delivery of an effective service. It holds them to account for reaching an in-year budget balance, and it allocates additional funding to local authorities. So it's got a number of facets to it. It does not require local authorities to make cuts to services. I want to make that clear, because I think that's one of the sort of messages that sometimes I hear. It does not require local authorities to make cuts to any services, but it does require them to run their special needs systems, their high needs systems, more effectively. That's a little bit of how the program works. Local authorities are invited onto it on the basis, really, of the size of their deficit. They work on plans for managing their high needs system, even without being involved in safety valve. Local authorities with deficit budgets are meant to have deficit and send specialist advisors, all of whom in their working lives have worked at local authority level. Advisors are working closely with local authorities as they develop their plans. So making sure that the plans are robust, have got good timescales, and are likely to be realized. That, of course, is a very long-term prediction. The local authority will then submit a final proposal. It's in essence a plan for a 5-year period. Ministers have to approve every plan, and there are times when there's pushback, further evidence is required, and then the local authority and the department enter into an agreement for a 5-year period. And the criteria for being involved, again, I won't go through every bullet, but they do have to demonstrate all of these factors if we're going to approve if we're going to reach an agreement with them and provide the additional funding. So we want to make sure that the plan is deliverable. We want to be confident that the ways of managing it will be robust. And ultimately, we want to make sure how the plan will improve support for children with high needs. So we only enter into a safety valve agreement with a local area when we've got assurance that from our specialists that the proposals do represent suitable and effective plans for children and young people. And again, I want to emphasize that safety valve agreements do not include any violation of a local authority's statutory duties. There are no caps placed on local authorities in relation to the number of EHC plans they have, and there's certainly no changes to their statutory duties. So again, this is what the majority of agreements that we've had, so we've had 34 so far, they are investing in early intervention to try and identify and meet children's needs earlier. They are supporting mainstream schools, again, very much a focus on inclusive mainstream schools, but they want to support mainstream schools to meet a higher level of need where that's appropriate for the child. They want to invest in the culture and relationships with key partners, including parents and schools, to make sure there is joined up decision-making. And they want to ensure that we have appropriate use of specialist provision. And again, getting that balance right between state-funded provision and the independent sector. Again, to emphasize that they are about effective running of high needs systems, not designed to cut services. We've produced guidance, there's commentary, there's some research. All of these are things you'll be able to look at when you click on these slides. There's also, during the process, the department does engage directly with the local authority, and we have some very challenging conversations, let's say, about the local authority's weaknesses, the reasons why they're in such a deficit, but the relationship between local authorities and their partners, including parents, is a very core element of what's being tested as we look at the potential for agreement. We never enter into a safety valve agreement with a local area unless we are confident we'll engage appropriately with partners. Of course, it's going to be touchy at times, but we need to see that there is dialogue and ongoing work between all partners. Most of the safety valve local authorities are very early on in their agreements. And of course, some are doing better than others. And a part of that will depend on where they were when they started. And actually, a large part of that is often to do with their existing relationships with their partners. Some will have got into difficulty, but have a good relationship with partners. Others will have got into difficulty and not have a good relationship with partners. And those sort of elements impact on how well progress is made in the first couple of years. I'm going to now, I'll just say what we're doing next. We're Continuing, we have a very tight monitoring process. We are looking at what we're learning research to look at the impact of sorry, I lost my thread. We are confident, that the intention of the agreements, for example, promoting early intervention and inclusion, is the right thing for children and young people. And that's exactly what our improvement plan is doing. There's many things that are running in parallel at the moment, and we're always keen to listen to feedback. So I'm going to pause, or I'm going to stop there and open it up to your thoughts, your comments, and so on. So someone's going to guide me through the many questions.
Yes, it's been very
Olivia,
busy. It's been very busy in the chat.
good.
So
I
I
would have
think I'll just
expected that.
I think I'll just summarize a few kind of key
Please, yeah.
points. People have brought up that there's been an evidenced increase in the complexity of children who are supposed to be in mainstream schools now, which is obviously causing pressures. People have commented that engaging schools and other colleges is absolutely vital in making sure that the work, and I think that was a response to what you said about schools being
I
more
can't
engaged.
emphasize it enough, and I keep saying
Yeah.
it internally, I keep saying it externally. We've got to bring schools very much closer to the core of the agenda.
Yeah. And then a big point here is that parent carer forums really need to be seen as full partners. They need to have their voices heard more. And someone brought up that there needs to be clearer guidance from the DfE about co-production with parents, so that all local authorities really understand what they have to do to engage with parent carer forums. And then finally, there's the problem between managing difficult budgets and providing services that give early intervention and are more helpful and more useful for young people and parent carers. And then there are a few questions. So do you want me to read them out?
Yeah, go through them. Yeah, I'm making a note.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first question is, should partnership with parent carer forums hold equal weight in safety valve as with DBV and the SEF?
I'm not sure how one would measure equal weight. Certainly, in many aspects, there should be equal work going on in terms of planning and so on. But there are times, I think, with safety valve where it's right that the department is meeting with the chief exec and the DCS and having some very frank conversations about the local authority's situation that I think schools should not be party to, nor should other partners. These are sort of conversations with people with huge financial and statutory responsibilities that may not be working out very well. And it's right that we have sort of more private conversations. But in principle, of course, in relation to problem identification, problem analysis, solution work, of course, they should be working equally in safety valve and DBV authorities, yes.
Okay. There's another question here which says, Andre, I would like to take this opportunity to ask why we cannot ring fence the notional funding for the SEND children. Would this make more sense to ensure that schools can support SEND children in mainstream settings in the correct way?
Yeah, an age-old question, whoever asked that.
That was from Sue.
Right. Again, it's something that the department keeps a very close eye, keeps under review. We're likely to be doing more work on high needs funding and school funding anyway, and that will be part of our consideration. Half the world thinks it's a good idea, half the world thinks it's a bad idea. And there are many schools we know that spend more than their notional budget on SEN, and there are other schools that spend less. What we don't want to do is create barriers to good practice. So it's a debatable point that has got views on either side, like so many things in SEN. But it's certainly something we keep under very close review and constantly talk about.
Thank you. And then there's a couple of areas where people have found that the case reviews in their programs didn't involve parents, and they were asking if this was the same for other areas. I'm guessing they were asking other parent carer forums, but is that something that you've seen in your work?
It's not something I've seen in my work. It's not something we would support. I don't know what the circumstances were. And I've met a number of parents who have said that they've been involved in case reviews. So I don't know the particular circumstances that happened there, but it's not something that we would support.
Yeah. And then one's just come in. We are part of Safety Valve and have been told that the local authority have to do a survey with families to measure impact. Is this a standard survey? They mention Newton, or should it be co-produced with partners?
And that's a Safety Valve authority.
Yes,
Well,
Safety
firstly, I
Valve.
mean, Safety Valve Authority, Newton aren't involved in them, so it wouldn't be that unless the local authority is saying, "Oh, I've heard that DBV have got a good survey. I might draw on that." It's not something we require local authorities to do, and we wouldn't say which one survey to use. So a local authority will make its own decision about surveys. It's a very, very good idea. I mean, I think I was saying that right from the beginning of my talk about self-evaluation frameworks. We need parents to be constantly surveyed.
Mm.
But there isn't, we wouldn't, at the moment, we don't recommend one particular one. And I think Newton have been using one with the Safety Valve local authorities. So maybe that's what that is.
Mm. And that's all the questions from the chat.
Okay, thank you. I can see that Matthew's again got his hand up. Hello, Matt.
Hello. Thanks, Andre. Just about that, about surveys. I was thinking the same thing. Ealing are not either in the Safety Valve system or in the DBV program.
Right.
However, we're engaged in going, and as part of our CEF, we're going through an awful lot of the works involved and taking a lot out of it. It would be extreme. I understand what you're saying about different surveys are available, but it would be really, really helpful for us to be able to survey and be able to measure across to the national perspective and the perspective of all those forums that are in the system. I think otherwise the problem is everybody's using different surveys. We can never actually correlate from one to another. And I must admit, I found it very hard to access. Maybe it's just me, but I can see the output from DBV and I can read it. I'm not so sure that I can copy it across. But one thing that's definitely missing for me is that survey, which would be a really good place for us to start. Even if we worded, 6 out of 20 questions or whatever around it, it would give us a touch point.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see what I can do about it. So you basically want access to this survey.
The survey questions, obviously because I can't log into the portal, so I don't know the materials that have been distributed, etc. But that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll see what we can do about making that possible.
Can I just make the point that entitlement, you mentioned it earlier, I think you touched on it, is key to all of this, because along with all the other forums, we're just coming up against the brick wall of there is no money. We know there's no money. I haven't got any money in my house. I haven't got any money in my wallet. I get it. But what's interesting, what I've always wanted from people is tell me what my daughter, in my case, needs. Tell me then what you can provide, and then I can have some sort of understanding of what the gaps are. And, and I know what I have to do as well as what I need to find support elsewhere. And that I think is entirely missing still. And it really worries me because there's no clarity about the statutory entitlement being offered by the authority, and special schools, head teachers and others all, I don't mean this pejoratively, but they hide behind that. And they, for example, talk all the time about managing expectations. And I always say to them, I say, tell me what my child's entitled to, and then we can discuss expectations. And they use it as a weapon against us, frankly. There you go.
Well, interesting, Matt. The work in the improvement plan on national standards and is designed to try to help that improve and to make more clear what is normally available provision, ordinarily available provision.
Exactly.
And that's where I think that's hard work to do that. But I think that if we can succeed, it will help with that situation that you've described.
I totally understand, but
Yeah.
ordinarily available doesn't actually mean anything in the same way that ideal doesn't actually mean anything. It's entirely subjective. And so what's ordinarily available in Ealing may not be ordinarily available in Hertfordshire.
No, and that's exactly why we want to do this, to try and get nationally those sort of parameters more equal across all local areas, which is why we've got such differences from one local area to
But this
another.
is a reading of statute. This isn't really something that I or other parents should be getting involved in here. This is something that you, government and professionals, should be clear about from the outside. And actually, we get no clarity. So I get it. We need to find out what that baseline is, but still that baseline will be self-selected by individual authorities and organizations.
Yeah.
So, I want clarity about the entitlement. And I think it's that missing piece, in part, it's that missing piece between what the statement used to say and clearly and specifically lay out and what the Education, Health and Care Plan, which in principle is a fantastic idea, but is so often poorly implemented.
Matt's voice has disappeared.
Lucky you.
I just want to interrupt here.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, I was just going to say Andre has to go, so I just want to take this opportunity to thank Andre for his time today. It's really appreciated. And we'll send out the recording and the PowerPoint after this session.
Can I just ask if that will include the chat, Sarah? Because I can't download the chat, apparently.
We don't normally share chat. But I'll talk to colleagues to see if it's possible, just so you've got the comments. I'll find out.
Normally on Zoom, you can easily download it at any point.
I'll find out. I'll find out, Matthew. But
thank
you to everybody, and thank you, Andre. I know you've got to go.
Okay. Thank you to everyone, and let's hope that 2024 ends on a good note.
Yeah.
There's a long way to go.
Fair enough. Thanks, Andre.
Okay.